Welcome to the Rimworld mod rundown. We'll be taking a quick look at what you can expect to see from Biotech expansion Insectoid. For starters, you'll need to own the Biotech DLC as well as the additional workshop content Biotech expansion Core. Possibly the horniest splash screen I've ever seen. For of all things, humanoids spliced with insectoids. This mod introduces 3 new races, their supporting genes, and 1 new faction, the Splice Hive. It'll be populated with the new Splice Spiders, Spello Splices, and Splice Scarabs. Can't possibly imagine why the mod maker avoided naming the middle species Splice Peds. Would have been fun naming a colony Epstein Island. These 3 races have highly specific abilities and natural skill modifiers, leaning into playing with a very structured colony hierarchy. Spiders are your fighters and physical workers, Spellos focus more on intellectual pursuits, and Scarabs help with feeding the colony and making your equipment. There are also a host of new genes and abilities that you have to use, so let's break down exactly what each of the new races are capable of and what fun new things you've got to play with. First up is the Splice Spider. Skill-wise, they're strong at shooting and mining, great at melee and construction, poor with animals, and awful with art, medical, social, and intellectual, so they lean incredibly strongly towards certain roles. All Splice races come with pollution stimulus. Similar to wasters or normal insectoids, they'll see all of their stats improved when living in a toxic area, so pollution is not only ignored, it's beneficial to you. Aided by the gene of total antitoxic lungs to keep them safe from constantly breathing in standard London air. To assist with their combat orientation, spiders have unstoppable, feral might, and strong melee damage, allowing them to charge in fearlessly and cleave through targets with their bare hands, dealing absurd damage from the very start of the game. To offset the powerful melee, they're a little slower than normal and aggressive, which is highly dangerous to have on a pawn with such an overwhelming melee stat. Social fights are likely to be disastrous in a Splice colony. All spliced races come with the gene Cave Lover, which forces the undergrounder trait. To make it easier to thrive in the deep dark caverns of the earth, they also have dark vision to accompany it. This can be extremely beneficial for fights on your own tile, or in your own arenas, as your splice races won't be suffering from any accuracy penalties for fighting in pitch darkness, whilst the majority of enemies will be swinging or firing blindly as you rip them to shreds. As you'd expect from a race that loves living underground, they're hit with a bit of UV sensitivity. Nothing too serious, about the same as Ed Sheeran going outdoors in the summer. They'll be uncomfortable, but they'll live. The last few bits that you'll be familiar with are strong stomach, which all of the splice races have, so a colony of these will never have to worry about food poisoning, which is far more beneficial on reflection than I'd have initially thought. No more poisoning spirals when someone decides to barf all over the freezer, and making the whole colony sick as a result.
Who wants chowder?
And despite the splash screen, splice spiders are given the very unattractive gene, a kind of don't look at the mantelpiece while you're poking the fire vibe. So on to these new genes then. First up, you've got the Mega Spider Thorax, which gives you the ability Toxin Injection. Somewhat unique to these species is that their abilities cost food to use, requiring a high burst of energy and emptying their belly a little. The injection is a very quick cast, 1 hour cooldown, toxic hit, applying 20% build-up to any humanoid-sized enemy. If you're fighting in an area that's already polluted, being able to instantly add an additional 20% might be enough to push someone down into a state of unconsciousness, or if paired with any pain and medical conditions they have, it could just make them fall over. Very useful as by itself it deals no damage, so it doesn't run any risk of obliterating the target with damage when you just wanted to tox them up a little. Next is the Mega Spider Head. This improves their mining speed by 125%, and puts a ridiculous image in my brain of them just headbanging their way through solid stone walls.
Given no tools, forced to break solid rock with nothing but their own thick skulls.
Mega Spider skin gives them that lovely buggy shade of brown. Toxic smog exhaust says that it comes from their respiratory tract, so thankfully, no, you can't have bugs going around farting on everyone. This works like a Toxpack utility item, erupting an AoE of toxic gas around the pawn and choking any others that aren't gifted with antitoxic lungs. As it says in the tooltip, the range is doubled when the entity is under the effect of metabolizing insect jelly, which, if you're fighting in a tight corridor, makes the gas spread an ungodly range. Next up is the Toxic Halo, which is more so for cosmetic purposes than combat impact. It gives the splice spiders a little toxic glow when they're in combat. Insect jelly metabolism is what plays in with the toxic smog exhaust. If your splice races aren't consuming insect jelly, they're hit with debuffs to their injury healing factor and will grow tired more quickly. The flip side of this is that the buff when they do have insect jelly in their bodies is significantly higher than the debuff, lowering sleep fall rate by 60% versus the 40% increase on the debuff, and improving injury healing factor by 30% rather than the 20% debuff. Does this mean that your colonists will spend the entire game eating nothing but insect jelly? Almost certainly, but at least you don't need to worry about cooking or nutrient paste that way. The last gene is Insect Jelly Bodybuilder. With splice spiders, jelly behaves like a protein shake, boosting not only their healing and sleep rates from the metabolism, but also buffing movement speed by 50%, manipulation by 25%, dodge chance by 0.3, melee damage by 133%, and lowering incoming damage to 75%. So the movement buff offsets the slow runner, and the melee damage buff is going to stack with Feral Might and strong melee damage, leading to a final melee damage value whilst unarmed of almost 250% because of how the percentages are applied. On a race that also has +8 to melee by default, this leads to an average melee damage on attacks that's over 30, which puts it into mono-sword territory, with bare hands. I honestly think these guys might top out VE Wasters as one of my favourite races. They're utterly savage and so niche in what they do. I love it. So, next species. Can't get carried away just yet. The Spellosplice is strong with intellectual, great with shooting and medical, poor with melee and awful at cooking and animals. So they're a solid backline combatant that's more than capable of patching up the melee line after a scrap. Just like spiders, they share the jelly metabolism, cave lover, antitoxic lungs, UV sensitivity, aggressive, very unattractive, strong stomach, dark vision, and pollution stimulus. So you can see that these races have a significant baseline of common genes. The Spelopede thorax and head unfortunately offer no bonuses like the Mega Spider versions do, being purely cosmetic, just like the skin tone, which is a slightly more beige shade. The Spelopedes still do have abilities that can be used though, in their own separate genes of toxic and volatile sting launchers. Both are severely buffed while the user is under the effect of insect jelly, so for prolonged firefights you also want to make sure they're carrying a pocket full of jelly, not only to fuel the abilities but to make sure they're most effective when used. The Toxic Stinger is a much faster ability than the spider's Toxin Injection, needing only a few seconds to cool down. It deals a small amount of damage and inflicts 10% toxic buildup when buffed. Very easy to use in volley fire with a few Spellosplices to bring down a high priority target rapidly. Volatile Stinger Launcher inflicts the target with a condition that will cause them to explode upon death, with the blast size increased depending on the severity of the condition. Being able to turn an enemy into a highly dangerous explosive within a raid group allows you to take down multiple targets by killing just a single one. The weird fire effect above the pawn isn't the best. I get that it's there to help with identification, but for this I'd probably have preferred something more similar to the glow effect on laser weapons when they're fully overcharged in heat up mode. A kind of very hot glow. Next you've got Insect Jelly Thinker, which is another metabolism effect, boosting 10 quality by 65%, research speed by 150%, and global learning by 133%. So while Spellosplices aren't likely to be passionate about a lot of skills, the ones that they do take part in, they'll absolutely fly through, as they are also gifted with the Quick Study gene. Spellos are then given fire resistant, which seemed a little odd at first. I'm thinking it might be here to try and help them rescue frontline fighters if the enemy's been using fire-based attacks, like a all-out imp assault, as not many bug species have this and your spiders would have to get into melee to do their damage. To make up for their strengths, the last genes are weak melee damage, which is understandable, and delicate, which means you'll want to keep them as safe as possible, with all Spello splices suffering 115% damage. Okay, last one. Splice Scarabs. As per usual, you've got insect jelly metabolism, cave lover, antitoxic lungs, UV sensitivity, aggressive, very unattractive, strong stomach, dark vision, and pollution stimulus. They're strong with animals and crafting, great with plants, poor with social, and awful with intellectual. If you've been keeping track of skills across the races, none of them are gifted with art, cooking, or social. Cooking doesn't necessarily matter given the jelly diet, but social will be the sticking point for these races. They're already hideous to look at and aggressive, like a colony of Andrew Tates, so social fights are going to be frequent and recruiting new members is going to be a chore, unless you want to set up a Discord and charge people for access. Anyway, what sets the Scarabs apart? They have their shell, head and skin, which are all again cosmetics. Only the spider got fun bits. Insect jelly producer will see Scarabs occasionally leaving small piles of insect jelly around the base every 24 hours or so. Insect jelly converter is a little more involved. You're given two abilities, food to jelly conversion and food to jelly transmutation. Conversion has next to no cooldown, costs half of the pawn's food bar and will allow them to regurgitate their stomach contents into insect jelly, meaning they can rapidly chow down on normal food and convert it into jelly for the colony. Food to jelly transmutation could be cast once per day and will turn a stack of raw food, or meals, into insect jelly directly, with the downside being it loses 20% of its nutritional value in the process, but saves you the legwork of manually eating, barfing, and repeating the cycle all day. Fortunately, this process is accelerated thanks to the gene of Rapid Eater that Scarabs possess, boosting their eating speed by 400%, so they don't really chew food as much as they just inhale entire meals. Scarabs are also able to tame insects, allowing you to keep unspliced versions of bugs as pets around the colony. Ideal if you can pacify the defenders around a nest so that it continually produces insect jelly for you without needing to destroy it. Scarabs now get a few more unusual genes given the direction that the past two races went, with Psychically Dull, lowering their sensitivity, Naked Speed, which boosts move speed when nude but slows them down if they're wearing clothes. Taking into consideration that Scarabs don't have any genes to help them with their temperature tolerances, you'll want to keep your mountain base very well regulated and comfortable for them if you plan on using this. They have Low Sleep, which will stack with their jelly metabolism bonus, allowing Scarabs to work for entire days without needing to nap. All Scarabs are then forced to have the Wimp trait because of extra pain, but you're unlikely to want them in combat anyway, as they also have the downside of nearsighted, making them awful ranged fighters and far too fragile to throw into melee. As well as strong stomach, Scarabs have robust digestion, which massively boosts the raw nutrition multiplier, allowing you to butcher corpses and then just breeze through the pile of meat that they leave behind, turning it very efficiently into jelly, although it will be a somewhat micromanagement intensive process. Finally, Scarabs have elongated fingers, boosting their manipulation by 110%, meaning whilst they work for days on end, they are also flying through any crafting or planting projects that you need them to do. Just fantastic little workers. I only wish that they had some kind of auto-cast on the jelly conversion. Hey folks, after having wrapped this video and uploaded it, an update just went live which has added some new genes. The Splice Spider now has hardened chitin and exogelatin, which sees it getting extra armor and then even more armor on top of that once it's consumed insect jelly. Insect Jelly Bodybuilder has also been slightly reworked, so now it increases movement by 50%, melee dodge chance by 0.3, melee damage factor by 133%, incoming damage multiplier by 75%, and it lowers melee cooldown to 80%. Which means that DPS value is going to be even higher on Splice Spiders now. All Insectoid races now have the option of injecting Insectoid genes to make it much easier to keep your entire colony spliced up. To offset the new genes that the Splice Spider has been given, they have also now been hit with poor cooking. The Splice Scarab has been slightly changed, so now it has Insect Jelly Labourer. So whilst under the effect of Insect Jelly, they get a movement speed buff, a manipulation buff, and a global work speed buff, all for 25%. And that's all the brand new updates. I'm glad I caught this before the video went live. So there you have it, an awesome little trio of races that you'll get to see raiding you as a hostile hive faction, with the mod also opening up some awesome colony ideas based around using just these 3 races. Absolutely perfect to pair with Insectoid Supremacy from Vanilla Expanded Ideology. Thanks for watching, folks. If you have any more mods you'd like to see a full breakdown for, or suggestions of mods you'd like to see covered, feel free to leave them in the comments. I might get around to them. I'll be back again soon with another Rimworld mod rundown. Wherever you are in the world, enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening. Take care.